Thanks for listening to Leadership Level Up. I'm Brian Prairie.
And I'm Dr. Jeff Williamson.
I am just starting my leadership journey.
And I've been guiding leaders for 30 years.
Our podcast aims to shine a spotlight on outstanding leaders and provide a platform for them to describe their leadership journey and share the guiding principles that have helped them become great leaders.
Welcome to Leadership Level Up Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Williamson. My co-host, Brian Prairie, is with us. And we're happy today to have our friend Antonio Marshall back with us for another conversation. We had an interview a while back, and you talked about some key leaders in your life. Coach Ralph Trey Hodge was your basketball coach at Olivet, as well as your father and some key people like that. And so it continued to talk about leadership. I want to bring that forward to more of the recent here and now. And that is that when you were really, I think, finishing up your playing days and were beginning to serve in the role of a coach at the university, you started to bring together this concept of a nonprofit, a ministry that you now call MANonFIRE. And so I wanted us to talk a little bit more about that, learn a little bit more about what that is, who you serve, what your goals are for that, because I've known about that for a long time. And it's just a beautiful part of who you are and what you do that's separate from your role at the university, separate from your role in ministry that you did before the past 5 years, really. So talk to us a little bit about where did MANonFIRE come from and what is a part of your mission and purpose for that?
Well, first off, thank you guys for having me back on. Excited to be here with you.
Thanks for being here.
MANonFIRE really, I think, was something that God birthed in me. So in 1997, my family and I are living in a kind of a bad area in Indianapolis, Indiana. Our apartment catches on fire. The apartment building catches on fire, extends to our apartment. My dad, we're kind of stuck third floor. Dad tries to lower himself down from the third floor to the second floor and falls. So we watch me, my three brothers, and my mom watch my dad fall from the third story of a building, shatters his right leg, still has 11 screws in his leg to this day, permanently disabled, but then crawl to the fire department. Huge reason why Dad is hero for me. I just watched my dad really give of his life for us in that moment. But then we move to Spencer, Indiana, town out in the middle of nowhere in the sticks, kind of close to where you grew up. And in 2002, our house, we leave to go to a friend's house. We come back, and anyone who's ever been to my house before, we live on what people have dubbed Marshall Mountain. So we live, again, out in the middle of the sticks, like gravel/dirt road. When it rains, just potholes, all kinds of things. Whenever it snows, hard to get up and down the hill. We live on a huge hill. So we come home, and it hadn't been raining at all, but we're about to go up our hill and we see water coming down. We're like, what's going on?
Strange.
Well, we get up there, fire department's there. Our house had burned down, electrical fire.
Oh my God.
2002. I go to school at Olivet, 2007 to 2012. And going in, like actually finishing my senior year, that summer, July 3rd, me and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, O'Malley, we go home and wake up on July 4th to my mom yelling, fire, fire. We're like, I'm thinking in my head.
Again? Yeah.
I'm thinking in my head.
This can't be happening.
Well, I'm thinking, my mom, is she cooking something?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a
little
maybe
flash.
she needs somebody to like help her put it out. I'm not going to be the one to do it. It's too early. Like my dad can help her. But then I start to realize after a moment, like she's not yelling fire as in like,
somebody help me.
Somebody help me put this out. She's yelling fire. Like everybody better get out of the house.
Okay.
So in 2012, July 4th, 2012, we watched our house burn down. The unique thing about that is I acknowledged Jesus as Savior and Lord 2011. So a year previous to that, 2012, God's doing some things in my life. And I meet with Greg Chenoweth. Greg Chenoweth speaks some life into me. He says, I could see you running a ministry called MANonFIRE. First time those words had ever been spoken to me before. I didn't come up with MANonFIRE myself. And also then So I could see you just like speaking in front of a lot of people. Both of those were kind of scary to me as a new Christian, not really knowing. And like, okay,
You're
thank
figuring
you.
out a lot of things
Yeah.
at that point. Yeah.
Coach Hodge gives me my first young man, Leighton Howard, to train. And I'm like, I love basketball, love the process of getting better, but I don't like me leading someone and helping them. But it really felt like in this season, God, like, say all that to say, like, the words made on fire within, I mean, like, just were spoken to me. The third fire happens. Leighton Howard, this young man, I start training, and it felt like in many ways, God was starting to birth something in me using my own story. It really just happened one evening. I was just riding out, riding out on by the soccer fields.
Okay, yeah.
And I was riding my longboard, just praying and thinking. And God just really laid my own salvation story on me. Basically, and like really birth, like I see that as kind of the birth of MANonFIRE really in those moments. And so MANonFIRE came from that. I think last time we had talked a little bit about the reality of just like sometimes we do things on our own and then God calls us to something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was my season of being at Olivet for about 3 or 4 years with this ministry. I was kind of the solo artist, kind of just training, doing basketball camps and things like that. And then God called me to go to Grand Rapids and be a youth pastor. And I really look at that transition for myself, and transition has been a huge part of MANonFIRE. But I really look at that transition as the transition from God saying like, okay, here's what you can do on your own to what I'm actually calling you to do, which is going to be bigger than you. So then that transition to Grand Rapids happened, and I've been kind of working on transitioning now that we're back in Bourbonnais. So
yeah. And MANonFIRE really, I would say, took root even more when you were in Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
And so obviously it started where we are now.
Yep.
But then as you had opportunities to work with young students there, there was more things came out of MANonFIRE in addition to basketball training and camps and clinics. And I'd love to have you tell a little bit more about Torch and Blaze and Tribe and some of the things that you built to help and continue investing in young women and men.
Yeah. So I think that transition from Bourbonnais to Grand Rapids, in Bourbonnais doing basketball training, it wasn't even a 501 at that point, just something like my basketball training, named it kind of fire training, and the organization MANonFIRE. I moved to Grand Rapids, and within probably 6 months, met a young man named David, and David helped me turn MANonFIRE, a college student at Cornerstone, helped me turn MANonFIRE into a nonprofit organization. That summer, met some local kids, Rashawn, who really now is like my son, Rashawn, Amari, Asan, and Aaron. Met them at a local park whenever I was doing some things with youth group. And I was like, hey, like, you guys are playing basketball?
You're ballers.
Hey, guess what?
Let's talk.
I got a gym. Like, y'all don't got to play outside. Like, what are y'all doing? It's snowing. And those, like, honestly, those 4 young men they're my little brothers now. Rashawn sees me as a dad. And really the foundations of what God was going to do in MANonFIRE at that time. So then me and a group of leaders got together and started to think, what do we want our mission, vision, and values to be? Jeff, you were a part of that. And so we felt called to a mission of leading people to authentic freedom in Christ. And our vision was really to create safe spaces for youth development, holistic youth development, so that these young people could discover their gifts and serve others. And really that has been what we've been able to see, whether it through fire training, which is something that has always kind of existed in MANonFIRE, our basketball training. But then we decided to develop something called Blaze, a safe space for students who normally wouldn't have a safe space on a Friday or Saturday to do something with adults who cared about them. And so we started just hosting fun events, parties, if you will, and getting to know some kids around the community. We had something called Torch, which was an academic mentoring program that Hillary McDaniel led. And then we later developed something called Tribe, which is really like our our core group of 12 students that we invite into this discipleship, this mentorship relationship where they say yes and we say yes to them. And we are pouring into them by talking to them about strengths, which we talked about last time, helping them to understand how they are gifted in a safe space, but then really helping them to use those gifts to serve the mission, not just a Man on Fire, whatever God is calling them to as well. So that kind of has been the journey of Man on Fire and where we found ourselves.
Yeah. So if we back up to a little over a year ago, you have the opportunity to come back to your alma mater, enroll as an associate chaplain. And then about 6 months into that, the chaplain who'd been here many years had another job opportunity and moved. And next thing you know, you're the chaplain at the university. And so that has brought other responsibilities as a leader, as an influencer, those kinds of things. But I think it's also been a neat time because of you coming back in the community to have those roles at the university. It's allowed you to really redirect or revision Man on Fire in a new geographical location, still doing a lot of the same things, but some things different. So, what's Man on Fire looking like and becoming today now that you have made that transition?
Yeah. As a leader, one of the things, first off, I want to say the opportunity to be called back to Olivet and then to the community of Kankakee was one that, just an amazing blessing. Really, for me, this feels like home. Olivet, Kankakee, it feels like home, and really the place where the ministry Man on Fire got started. So in many ways, it's coming home to family, coming back to where the mission got started. But one of the things as a leader that I didn't want to do is I didn't want to assume that everything that we had created as an organization, all the safe spaces, if you will, initiatives that were needed anymore. And so we created a lot of those initiatives, those safe spaces based on what we were seeing as needs in the community in Grand Rapids, based on having conversations with like-minded organizations, based on having relationship with kids and realizing some of these kids literally have no food to eat on a Wednesday. They have no one who's pouring into them when it comes to their academics. They are playing basketball outside when it's 32 degrees outside because that's just what they love to do, and they're starving for someone to pour into them. So a lot of our initiatives were birthed out of relationship. One of the things that I wanted to do as a leader was to take some time to evaluate the landscape of this place again, to see what are the realities of need around here and what are the ways in which we are called to kind of help. We're not naive enough to think that we're the only ones that have a heart for this community. We know that there are a lot of other organizations, a lot of people who are trying to pour into youth, and really just want to come alongside people, come alongside teens, youth, for what it is that they need. And so in these days, one of our first things is to discern what is needed, have conversations with like-minded organizations, and to figure out what that looks like. With that being said, we definitely feel like basketball is something that is at the core of who we are, and tribe. So outside of that, we are just trying to engage in conversations with principals.
Kind of a wait and see.
What are the specific needs? But I think one of the things we know that for this community, basketball is huge. We know that it's a place where relationship first and foremost can be had. And then to be able to leverage relationship and the game of basketball to help an individual not just become a better basketball player, but to grow as a person. And so, it's been such a blessing to come back. A young man, just want to shout him out, Jordan Davis from St. Anne. He's doing amazing things there. I've been training him. It's been a blessing to just see him grow, not just on his game as a basketball player. He's doing amazing, but just as a young man in school, caring about his grades and things like that. And so I think that for us, we have some things that are at the core of who we feel like God has called us to be, but also we're holding our hands open in this season, I guess, and saying, what are the needs in the community and how can we partner? So
you're having conversations with some of the area high schools. with other nonprofits, with churches and ministries to learn some of those things as to like, hey, are there things you're doing that Man on Fire can partner with?
Yeah.
Are there gaps that maybe we ought to step into at some point in the future? So talk a little bit about that. Like some of the conversations you've had.
Yes, I know that Kankakee, like the Kankakee area, has a community liaison that, and she's really working really, really hard. Rebecca Parks, working really, really hard to create relationships with like-minded organizations. I know that Youth for Christ in this area is huge. Aaron Clark with the Kankakee Forgives and the initiatives. And Youth for Christ also has a tutoring. And so we're like, do we really need to create another tutoring? Like, I don't think that that's something that we really need. So
link arms,
thinking about having conversations with them. What are some areas that we can fill gaps? Talking with principals, talking with other people just about what it is that schools are really feeling like students are needing in this specific area and how can we help?
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, and I know one of the things that we've all had, I hope, a greater sense of awareness to the need is the mental health needs of everybody. But in the case of those you're serving, particularly young junior high, high school, and even college age students that you interact with on a daily basis. And so I think that's one of the key things that we're all trying to navigate and figure out, is there something, or there is, figuring out what is that something that us can do in that space, because I know you encounter those kind of challenges as you work with high school and young college students as well.
Yeah, it is something for us. I think we are a Christian organization, if you will, but we recognize and realize that spirituality, without meeting spiritual needs, without also meeting physical needs, without meeting mental, emotional needs, without meeting relational needs, is not it. We want to be able to help a student, help a person holistically.
Wherever they are.
So thinking about what that looks like, the greatest thing that we can do at times is maybe to offer some food. Yeah. The greatest thing that we might be able to offer a kid may not be a spiritual thing, but it may be just bring him in the gym and teaching him how to shoot a basketball, showing him that there's value in just spending time learning how to shoot or dribble a basketball. So meeting those physical, mental, emotional needs are things that we feel like are so important to really develop a person holistically.
Yeah.
So,
and I think back to what you talked about, Amari, it's like, yes, you started interacting with he and his brothers and others over the game, but then it's also like, hey, you were someone they learned they could trust. Yeah. They learned that you were someone they could go to above and beyond any sport, any game. Yeah. And I think that's part of the incredible work that you've been able to do with Men on Fire, is that it's so much more than the game. Yeah. Even though that's the core and that's the starting point.
Using the relationship to leverage. And so it's been a blessing to watch a young man like Rashawn, who, whenever I met him, he was 13 or 14 years old. He was walking to McDonald's, was about to be emancipated from his home. And he's okay with me sharing some of these things. He's 19 years old, 20 years old, and now he's running 10 McDonald's. Amari Stewart is a young man who loves basketball, has always had a heart for basketball. And he's gone from just like playing basketball to like, now he's about to step into a situation where he's going to be playing some professional basketball overseas. Asan, his younger brother, is a young man, 12, 13 when we met him, struggling in school, about to get kicked out of school. Now he's a worship leader. He's helping lead worship at a church. And none of this is just because of Man on Fire. It's because of some teachers, because of parents, people who really care about them. But it's been it's been a blessing to be a catalyst again, to like help them to realize the authentic freedom piece. And then just creating safe spaces for them to learn about their gifts. They're gifted. And Rashawn can use his knowledge about fast food and now lead.
And franchising and all the business.
And now lead as a 19, 20-year-old, lead 10.
That's amazing.
As a general manager. And just proud of the ways in which we've been able to like see these young men,
Yeah.
young women step into who God is calling.
I
them
was
to
just
be.
having these fond flashbacks too, because I've known you for years and I had opportunity to meet all those guys you were just
Yeah.
talking about
Yep.
when they were 8, 9, 10th graders. And then just to
See
hear the
now.
updates on what they're doing.
Yeah.
Boy, that inspires my heart.
Yeah.
For
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
What are
Very
some
cool.
of the surprising things when you talk to that age group? Sometimes they think, I feel like they, we talk above them, or we talk down to them.
Yep.
Like when you talk with them,
Yeah.
like what are some of the surprising things that you hear from them when you're talking with them?
Yeah, man. I think I like thinking about an incarnational model. So what you were just talking about, like you want them to feel like you are just with them,
Mm-hmm.
like not above them, not even really below them in a way, but just like with them.
Shoulder to
I think-
shoulders,
yeah,
a
yeah,
phrase I love.
So I think a lot of times right now, what I've experienced, and the blessing I think of MANonFIRE has been, I think we thought that it was going to be an organization that would primarily focus on lower income. I think we even inner city.
Mhm.
I think, but God has like blessed us to be able to have influence in a lot of different. Diversity is one of our values, and so a diverse level of whether it be economics, whether it be ethnicity,
Mhm.
culture, and the one thing that I think is universal is that there are a lot of young people that feel like they are alone, whether they are literally on their own or they have a big family, and yet, because we can be in a room full of 1,000 people and still feel lonely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I think that feeling of loneliness is something that, like really being alone when it comes to the core of who they are and what their hopes and things are for the world. I think that is something that I've witnessed and experienced as I've done the work of youth ministry over the last like 10, 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Go ahead.
Well, it sounds like though that you're, to use the basketball reference, on the same team. And you're trying to, and to make them feel that they're not alone. And I think that's the one thing when you're depressed or lonely is you feel like, well, I'm this island and I'm never going to get off this island. And then having people around you that are like, hey, I understand where you're at. But let's go shoot some hoops. Let's
I'm
go
with you, man.
Yeah,
and that is the blessing is like, I think that they are gifted. They have strengths,
yes.
But it takes someone just being with them and showing them that they notice it in them for them to sometimes that's all that it takes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not talking over them. It's not really talking directly. I mean, there's times where you have to have the hard conversation.
Well, yeah.
But a lot of the times it really is just as you are with people in general, specifically youth because of the organization, like there's just something powerful about being with people and what that does to the psyche, what that does, what that does to the person. It just brings out it brings out the best parts of us when we feel like we belong.
And I think when especially those tender years of junior high school, for maybe anyone to just say, I like that about you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it's drawn me to Strengths 20 years ago, is just that people can say, I like that about you. I noticed how tuned in you are. I noticed how good you are. I noticed how you responded to that person who got hurt, or you responded to that person who had a big win, and you were so plugged in and excited for them. Just to have someone in their life to say, I like that about you. I think we all need that. I mean, I'm 61 and I still need every once in a while to have people go, I see what you're doing and I like that about you. I mean, we all need that. And it's hard sometimes.
I see what you're doing and I like that about you.
Thank you. And I know he means it. So it's like the other day we were having a staff meeting and we just were grappling with some hard things, but we disagreed agreeably. And as we were wrapping up the meeting and I was leaving, I just said, can I tell you, I like all you guys and I love working with you. And they were like, same, And so sometimes it's just giving voice to those good things that we feel, but we don't always voice to other people.
I think some of the memories that I have within MANonFIRE are those. So I think on one end, what are the needs, or what are the things that I'm seeing, is that loneliness. On another hand, one of the ways in which I've seen just youth really perk up and be very, very excited, I think about the times where they realize what their strengths are. And then we like show all of their strengths, and they get to talk about themselves and how but then they get to see, well, time out. Nobody has that strength but me, or nobody has. And they start to realize, like, maybe for the first time, these people, I have something to offer that nobody else has to offer. I am needed. I am wanted. There's something about me.
Like, how empowering is that?
All people need to hear or to realize that when I'm not here, something's missing because I'm not here.
Right.
So it's been great to have you again. Thanks for coming back and talking with us more about MANonFIRE, your nonprofit, along with your work that you're doing these days at Olivet Nazarene University. Just great having a conversation with you, hearing your heart and what you're trying to do with those you serve. So thanks again for being back with us.
Thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leadership Level Up. Please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations with great leaders.